For Eric J on Sports, I'm Eric J, and this is what I think. 2022 is coming to a close. If you've watched my other video, you've heard me say that already. But in this instance, I'm not talking about all of sports. I'm just talking about professional wrestling. And in 2022, what we're finding out is there are a lot of things that companies are doing very right and some things that the companies are doing very wrong. Roman Reigns and the Usos are at the top of their games right now. They're at the top of the business. Roman Reigns is a stud. He's held his WWE championship for over 2 years now. Roman Reigns is the man in the business. But the reason that's the case is because there's nobody to face him. WWE is having a really hard time building new stars that would be credible enough to actually defeat Roman Reigns. WWE should not have to depend on Brock Lesnar and Goldberg and Drew McIntyre for every main event. They shouldn't have to call John Cena from Hollywood to face Roman Reigns. They shouldn't have to call The Rock from Hollywood to face Roman Reigns. There should be guys on the roster who are credible enough to defeat Roman Reigns. And even if you don't let them win and you let Roman keep the belt, the fans should think that these guys can win. If you don't want to go with the older guys like AJ Styles or Kevin Owens, or you don't want to go with some smaller guys like Johnny Gargano or Roderick Strong, maybe you build up your new guys better. Maybe you build up some of the indie guys like Austin Theory or Damian Priest. Or maybe you take these young guys that you're creating, that you're building, that you're signing and teaching them the WWE way, and you make them stars, and you put them in a position to where they could conceivably defeat Roman Reigns. Paul White and Kurt Angle won the World Heavyweight Championships in their respective companies, Kurt Angle WWE, Paul White WCW, in their first years in the business. Because by the time they got to that point, they were credible enough to win world titles. Brock Lesnar won a world title in his second year in the business. It's not hard. These companies used to do it. But somehow today, if you don't look like Roman Reigns, or if you don't look like Drew McIntyre, then you're not going to be WWE champion. And the sad reality is nobody else in the company looks like those two guys. So nobody else in the company will be WWE champion with the possible exception of Goldberg, Brock Lesnar, Drew McIntyre, John Cena, or The Rock. But speaking of the Usos, and tag team wrestling has become passé. And it shouldn't have. Tag team wrestling used to be a staple of professional wrestling. Impact Wrestling, when they were TNA Wrestling under the leadership of Jeff Jarrett, made their living on tag team wrestling and the X Division. The World Championship was literally an afterthought because the tag teams were so great and the X Division were so great. But the Usos have carried their belts forever because there's no one for them to fight, just like Roman Reigns keeps having to look at Brock Lesnar and Goldberg and Drew McIntyre over and over again. The Usos seem to always find their way to the New Day. The other tag teams within the company are not credible enough to be tag team champions. You don't want to put Chad Gable with Jason Jordan, that's fine. Putting him with Otis, probably not a good idea because you could have left Otis with Tucker and made them champions, but you fired Tucker. The Viking Raiders, Heavy Machinery, whatever you want to call them, Eric and Ivar, are a joke as a tag team. You had a tag team once of AJ Styles and Omos. You put together a faction with Mustafa Ali as the leader, a bunch of big guys in masks, and they never became credible. There are no legit tag teams in WWE. And this is why the Usos are at the top of their game, because there's no legit tag teams. And speaking of having to go back to Brock and Goldberg and the New Day, Sami Zayn is doing some of the best work in his career, but he should not have to keep looking at Kevin Owens. The guys have been friends forever. They were best mans at each other's wedding, but everything Sami does should not end up back facing Kevin Owens, and everything Kevin Owens does should not end up back across the ring from Sami Zayn. These guys have done enough that they should be able to face other guys. These guys have done enough that they should be able to do other things. If you want to team them, team them. Maybe they can beat the Usos. But they shouldn't have to keep fighting each other until their careers are over. We've seen it. We've done it. We've been there. We got the t-shirt. We wore it. We outgrew it. It ripped. Both of these guys should be able to move on to somebody else. WWE needs to start letting their stars make money. What do I mean? Mandy Rose was fired because she had an outside fan site that she chose not to affiliate with WWE, and she made a good amount of money with it, and they didn't want her to do that because the rule in WWE is if you have one of these, you affiliated with WWE, you operated under your WWE guise, and whatever you make from that fan site or from that YouTube channel or from selling decks of cards on QVC in the middle of the night, whatever it is, we take what you make from your salary and your salary stays your salary. So if you are a $100,000 a year talent and you somehow make $50,000 in a year on your YouTube channel, WWE will withhold $50,000 from your salary and your total income for the year will be $100,000. So Mandy Rose chose not to do this. She got fired. And in the 1 month since she got fired, she made $500,000 on her fan site. There's no reason why she can't just get rich outside of the business. AEW does it the right way. AEW lets their stars make money outside of the business. Most of the talents in AEW have YouTube channels. A lot of them are shot by Brandon Cutler, but most of them guys have YouTube channels. Most of the guys have outside interests and they're allowed to make money, and the company doesn't care. Because if you are truly an independent contractor, your boss cannot tell you what you can do away from what you do for your boss. But WWE calls them independent contractors, chooses not to pay benefits, but then doesn't allow them to do anything else. While AEW allows their stars to work outside of the company. And the funny thing about letting stars work outside of the company is that you'll see a guy like Brian Cage go to Game Changer Wrestling and win a championship. You'll see a guy like Adam Cole go to New Japan and win a championship. Kenny Omega has won championships in Japan and in Mexico. You see guys go to other companies. The Hardys were winning titles all over the place. You see these guys go to other companies and win championships. And the way it works in the independents is that if they bring in a talent like a Brian Cage, like the Hardys, like Ricky Starks, like Wardlow, like Samoa Joe, or whoever it is, if they bring in a talent like that and they give that guy the championship, they know this to be true. We signed Brian Cage for a one-shot. He came in and we put the belt on him. So as a result of that, Brian Cage has to come back at least one more time to defend the belt, which means that if we put Brian Cage on our poster and we advertise that Brian Cage is going to be at our event, more people are going to come out because we now have at least one star that people know by name and will pay to see. When Carl Anderson and Doc Gallows were in Impact and their contract expired, they started working for other companies, not really sure if they were going to sign with an AEW or WWE, and Carl Anderson went to New Japan and won the Never Openweight title. Then they signed with WWE, and WWE says, well, so what? You won the Never Openweight title. You can't work for New Japan. We don't care. And so New Japan was at a loss because they had a Never Openweight title in the hands of a WWE contracted wrestler, and they didn't know what to do about it. And it took a bunch of negotiating to get Triple H and Stephanie to say, yeah, he can go defend the title. He's going to drop the belt and then he could come back. Devon Dudley, who works as a producer and isn't even a talent, was signed to an event where he was going to show up and they were going to pay tribute to talents that used to work for ECW. They weren't going to say ECW because that's against the rules, but they were going to pay tribute to talents who worked for ECW. And Devon was going to be required to watch a video of Terry Funk, and Terry Funk was going to say, Devon, get the table. Devon was going to slide under the ring, pull out a table, set it up, handed to Bubba. Bubba was going to put somebody through a table, and that was going to be the end of Devon's participation in the event, except he was going to be there to receive some applause and have his name called. WWE threatened to fire him if he showed up at this event. Even though he's a producer and an agent and works backstage and never gets seen on TV, they threatened to fire him if he participated in this event, which is absolutely ridiculous. But that's the WWE way. Which brings me to AEW. Tony Khan is doing it right. Tony Khan lets his wrestlers go work for other companies. Tony Khan lets his wrestlers do what they want to do because they are independent contractors. Tony Khan knows that if you win the AAA title, if you win some other title for some other company, they can promote it on their TV, and that company gets a little bit of a rub from AEW. That belt looks a little bit bigger, which means that if they defend the belt on AEW television, that company's belt gets a little bit more shine, a little bit more prestige. And then if another AEW talent wins that title, then that AEW talent gets to go headline shows for that company. Also, if a top AEW talent like a Hikaru Shida or the Hardys or FTR or somebody else, Brian Cage, wins your title and they come back, they go on AEW TV and beat some top guys on AEW TV, then go back to your company, the guy who beats them or the girl who beats them is now considered a much better talent than they were before, which means now it means something to have, Exploder 6 beat Brian Cage for the GCW title and then have to defend it because Exploder 6 beat Brian Cage, who beat Ricky Starks, who almost beat MJF, who is the AEW champion. It means something for that guy. It means something for Sonny Blossom to beat Hikaru Shida for whatever title Hikaru Shida holds from whatever company Hikaru Shida holds it, because Hikaru Shida is the former longest reigning AEW women's champion. Hikaru Shida beat everybody in the company except Britt Baker. So if you beat Hikaru Shida for whatever title Hikaru Shida is holding, you are now a stud, because Hikaru Shida doesn't lose very often. Also, Tony Khan is choosing to not waste time, effort, energy, and resources on guys who don't want to be there. A lot of people are clamoring for Miro. A lot of people were clamoring for Malachi Black. A lot of people were clamoring for a lot of these former WWE talents like Andrade, who signed with AEW after they were fired from WWE. And then when Triple H took over and rose to power, they started hearing rumblings and rumors that these guys wanted to go back to WWE because they preferred to work under Triple H than they did working under Vince McMahon. So Tony Khan is being smart about it. He would love to have Miro on TV in storylines doing things, but what he's finding out is that a lot of these ex-WWE guys feel like they're better than the AEW talent, so they don't want to be put in storylines where they're going to come out on the bottom. So they're choosing not to work. And at the same time, they're looking at the grass is greener on the other side. They're saying, okay, Triple H is in power. Triple H did right by me in NXT. Triple H is a fan of mine. Maybe I'll go back there. And so Tony Khan is saying, okay, fine. If you want to go back there, we'll just let your contract run out and you can go. I'm not going to fire you, but I'll let your contract run out. Then you can go and you can find out. William Regal was allowed to leave early because Tony Khan figured if you're going to keep talking about going over there and you don't want to be here, then I don't want you here. That's business. That's the way you do it. If you don't want to work for me, then I don't want to work with you. So I'm not going to spend money and spend TV time and put in the effort to promote you and to book you and to use you if ultimately you don't want to be here. I'll pay you to not show up, and then I'll let you leave when your contract expires. But the funny thing is that Triple H was supposed to be the anti-Vince. He was supposed to do things differently. He's letting guys get their full names back. He's letting guys use their old indie names. He's letting guys be who they were. But that's the way it was at the beginning. Kind of like a couple that gets back together after a breakup. There were some things that went wrong that caused the breakup. Then they got back together and things are just absolutely perfect. People are doing everything right. And then all of a sudden, after a while, they start falling back into the habits that caused the breakup in the first place, because those habits did not go away. So Triple H was going to be the anti-Vince, but now all of a sudden we're seeing some of the silly sketches and some of the dumb storylines and the lack of talent promotion and the lack of talent creation, the lack of star creation that existed under Vince McMahon. And WWE today looks like WWE yesterday. And if you remember Vince McMahon spouting that tagline, yesterday, today, tomorrow, forever, or whatever the thing is. I know somebody's going to write in and tell me I got it wrong, but that's fine. But you think about the tagline, WWE is the same yesterday as it is today and will be tomorrow and will be forever, no matter who's in charge. Because they are going to run the company with Vince's vision because they think they're the best and they don't have to change. So WWE is going to be the same. But these guys are going to want to go back because they feel like that the grass is greener, and they're going to come to realize that it's not. Because being allowed to work other places is a good thing. Being allowed to have outside activities that you don't have to pay the company to do is a good thing. Being able to have a life of an independent contractor while you're being referred to as an independent contractor is a good thing. And some of these guys don't realize that not having to work 300 days a year is not bad. Yes, you want to work, but if you can take some time off, then that's a good thing. Speaking of, Roman Reigns is doing some of the best work of his career, but the MVP of professional wrestling right now is Jon friggin' Moxley. Jon Moxley is carrying AEW, and Jon Moxley is carrying professional wrestling right now. Jon Moxley won the championship, won the AEW championship, lost it to Kenny Omega, who lost it to Adam Page, who lost it to CM Punk. CM Punk got injured, and they needed someone to put the belt on. So they called Jon Moxley and put the belt on him, so Jon Moxley is now the first two-time AEW champion. Jon Moxley dropped the title back to CM Punk, which put AEW back on the path they wanted to be on. They wanted to have CM Punk face MJF. They wanted to have CM Punk face Bryan Danielson. They had a whole lot of stuff they wanted to do with CM Punk. But as soon as CM Punk got the belt back, he did some things that ticked off Tony Khan. So they took the belt back off of CM Punk. And who did they go to? They went back to Jon Moxley. And Jon Moxley carried the company. Why is that so important? Because Jon Moxley carrying the company is not a big deal. He's a 3-time champion now. But it's important because when he dropped the belt to CM Punk the first time, he was supposed to take some time off. He was dealing with some issues. He had just gotten out of rehab. He wanted to rest, take some time off, spend time with his wife, who currently was not working except for her podcast. He wanted to take some time off. He wanted to rest. He wanted to recuperate. He wanted to get himself back together and be the best Jon Moxley he could be. But CM Punk got injured. So they called Jon Moxley because Kenny Omega was hurt. They called Jon Moxley because Adam Cole wasn't ready yet. MJF wasn't ready yet. Wardlow wasn't ready yet. They didn't have Samoa Joe yet. Hobbs wasn't ready yet. Starks wasn't ready yet. So they went back to Jon Moxley. And then when CM Punk had his press conference and said a whole bunch of stuff that ticked off the owner and got himself suspended, in quotes, they went back to Jon Moxley again. Because at this point, Page wasn't ready yet. Omega's still injured. And the rest of those guys I named weren't ready to be world champion yet. You didn't want to put the belt on Orange Cassidy. You didn't really want to go back to Jericho because he had a whole bunch of other stuff going on. Sammy Guevara wasn't ready yet. The Pillars, Darby Allin, Orange Cassidy, MJF, Sammy Guevara, they weren't ready yet. So they went back to Jon Moxley. And Jon Moxley carried the company. He carried the company. He allowed Bryan Danielson to be who he wanted to be and to do what he wanted to do. And Jon Moxley kept AEW afloat until MJF was ready, and now MJF is going to be a great world champion. And we've already seen it through his first defense. Jon Moxley, Roman Reigns is having the best year, having the best time of his career, but Jon Moxley is the MVP of professional wrestling right now. And I dare anyone to dispute that. Maybe now Jon Moxley can get the break that he wanted earlier this year, late last year, because MJF is ready now. And because Bryan Danielson is going to be MJF's first real feud, they don't really need Jon Moxley right now. And speaking of Bryan Danielson, going back to what I talked about the ex-WWE guys who are working in AEW, losing matches is not a bad thing if you're helping to create talent. Bryan Danielson is showing that putting guys over makes those guys studs, which helps the business. Chris Jericho is showing that putting guys over makes those guys studs, which helps the business. Chris Jericho lost a match to a guy who'd only had one match in AEW, and that was a loss to QT Marshall. Chris Jericho saw something in the video of that match and said, this guy's going to be a star. Let me help him. So Chris Jericho goes out into the ring on Dynamite, goes 15 minutes with this guy while the fans chant, let's go jobber. And Chris Jericho puts this guy over and lets this guy defeat him. And have promo time at his expense. And run him out of the ring in defense of Ricky Starks. Chris Jericho is helping to make Action Andretti a star. Because he saw something in him and he realizes that he has 8 world titles and a million other belts, and he's been on TV and he's been in movies and he's hosted game shows and he's done everything he wants to do. He's the front man for a rock band. He's done everything he wants to do. He's been on singing reality shows. He's been on dancing reality shows. He's done it all. So it's time for him to give back. A lot of these guys, a lot of these ex-WWE guys can learn from that, because if they don't want to work, because they don't want to lose feuds, they're not realizing that the future of the business depends on it. And lastly, what's taking so long to put The Rock in the Hall of Fame? Because he wants to keep having matches? What's taking so long to put Paul Heyman in the Hall of Fame? Because he's continuing to work on TV? Understand this. Goldberg still has matches. Lita, Beth Phoenix, still have matches. Stone Cold had a match at the most recent WrestleMania. Edge is a Hall of Famer and is a regular talent on WWE television. Kane is a politician, an elected official, but he still comes back from time to time and appears on WWE television, and he's a Hall of Famer. Why can't you put The Rock and Paul Heyman in the Hall of Fame, even though they're still working? Rock's not even active. He has one match every 3 or 4 years, and it's because they keep calling him just like Brock and Goldberg, because they don't have anybody for Roman Reigns to fight. Paul Heyman is going to do what he does until he dies. Do not wait until he dies to put him in the Hall of Fame. And speaking of the Hall of Fame, I'll close with this. Lex Luger and Raven deserve to be in the WWE Hall of Fame. And I'm not just saying it because I think the WWE Hall of Fame is some great institution or some great award, because it's not. Coco Beware is in the WWE Hall of Fame, but Two Cold Scorpio's not. So you figure that out. But Lex Luger was a world champion in WCW. Lex Luger was going to be a world champion in WWF, but they changed their minds on him at the last minute. Lex Luger won as many titles as many of the guys in the company. And he had a great career. The only strike against Lex Luger is he was doing drugs with Elizabeth, and Elizabeth died. And he used steroids. But then so did Hulk Hogan. So did Randy Savage. So did Mr. Perfect. So did Eddie Guerrero. So did the Ultimate Warrior. All these guys use steroids. So you can't fault Lex Luger for that. Sting used steroids. So you can't fault Lex Luger for that either. Because if you think about it, Eddie Guerrero didn't die of an overdose, but he died because of his drug use. Rick Rude, Mr. Perfect, they died of overdoses. And they're in the Hall of Fame. Lex Luger deserves to get his flowers while he's still alive. Put him in the WWE Hall of Fame. Also put Raven in the WWE Hall of Fame. Raven is the only individual in the history of professional wrestling to have an action figure from 4 different companies. Think about that for a second. He has a WWE action figure. He has a WCW action figure. He has an ECW action figure. And he has an Impact Wrestling action figure. He was an ECW champion twice. He was the Impact World Champion, or the NWA World Champion. He went to WCW, won the U.S. title, and was the guy who dropped the belt to Goldberg when Goldberg was in the middle of his meteoric rise. Then he went to WWE. He worked as a manager in WWE for the 3-time World Tag Team Champion Rougeaus. He was an announcer in WWE. And he was a wrestler in WWE and still holds the record for the most titles in WWE history with his 31 hardcore championship victories. No, I know R-Truth has passed him by having 45 24/7 belt victories, but both of those belts were jokes and shams anyway, so it doesn't matter. But he had 31 hardcore title victories. If you think about it, other than his 1 world title and his couple of tag titles, that's all JBL was too. So Raven was a character. Raven, as Scotty the Body in WCW and Global Wrestling, was a star. Raven, as Scotty Flamingo, was a manager and announcer in WWE or WWF. And as Raven, he was a talent in WWF. And he was a talent. He was a champion in WCW. He was a champion in ECW. He was in the greatest feud in ECW history. Raven deserves to be in the WWE Hall of Fame. What are you waiting for? And on that same token, since Impact has a pseudo working relationship with WWE by virtue of Mickie James working in the Royal Rumble, go ahead and put AJ Styles in the Hall of Fame, Impact. Go ahead and do it. Maybe WWE will allow it, but go ahead and do it. Don't waste too much more time. Remember to like and share this video and subscribe to this channel, and visit my website at the URL in the description below, and follow me on Facebook at Eric J on Sports 1 and on Instagram and Twitter at Eric J on Sports. And for Eric J on Sports, I'm Eric J, and this is what I think.